Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive.
Hmm.
Today we were going to try to get to the bottom of something that I think affects all of us, and that is stress at work. And you hear all the time that like, oh, workplace stress, it's higher than ever.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, sort of roll their eyes and they're like, yeah, I've heard it all before.
Right.
But turns out this time it might actually be true.
It's true.
So we've got a really interesting article here from BBC News
Hmm.
that dives into this whole phenomenon of like, why are we more stressed now than we were even during like peak pandemic,
Right.
when you would think like, things would be calming down.
Yeah.
But actually, it seems like the opposite is happening.
It really is.
So we're going to try to unpack that a little bit, figure out what's going on. And to help us with this, we have our expert here. So maybe you could just like quickly introduce yourself and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So I spend a lot of time thinking about and researching stress and well-being in the workplace. And I also work with organizations to help them create healthier and more supportive environments for their employees.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start with like the basics here. What are we even talking about when we say work-related stress? Because it feels like such a big umbrella term.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Better Health Channel actually has a really good definition. They basically say it's when the demands of your job exceed your ability to cope.
Okay, so it's that feeling of like, I've got too much on my plate.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, that feeling of overwhelm.
Yeah.
Like you're constantly treading water,
Right.
just trying to stay afloat.
And it's so personal too, right? Like what stresses one person out might be like another person's like, dream job.
Oh, absolutely.
Like I actually kind of thrive under a little bit of pressure. But I know other people who just like completely shut down
Right.
if they've got like a deadline looming.
It's totally subjective. It's really about how you perceive the situation. But I think even though it's subjective, there are some common culprits that kind of tend to come up again and again.
Yeah, for sure. So like our sources here, like the Better Health Channel, the NHS, they all list a whole bunch of these things.
Yeah.
Like, we've got the classics, crazy workloads,
Mhm.
long hours, feeling like you have zero control over your actual work.
Right. Those external factors that just kind of pile on the pressure. And I think it's not just the amount of work, it's also that feeling of insecurity. Like when your job feels unstable or the company's constantly changing, that can really mess with your sense of well-being.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I remember like I worked at this one place where they restructured like every 6 months, it felt like.
Mhm.
And it was just like this constant state of like, oh, who's getting laid off next?
Oh my gosh.
It was terrible.
I can only imagine.
Not exactly a breeding ground for like calm and focus.
No, not at all.
And then you've got like the whole other layer of like toxic workplaces, right? Where you're dealing with like a terrible boss or, colleagues who are just like making your life miserable.
Ugh, yeah, those interpersonal dynamics can be so draining, Think about like a boss who's constantly micromanaging you or criticizing you publicly, or a coworker who's like always gossiping and stirring up drama. Those kinds of environments can make even the most enjoyable work feel unbearable.
Totally. So we've got kind of like these external pressures, right? And then we got all these internal things bubbling up. But how do we know when it's actually becoming a problem?
Right.
Like, what are the signs that we should be looking for?
Yeah, that's where it's so important to pay attention to your body and your mind. Stress manifests itself in different ways, but there are some key symptoms to kind of watch out for. I like to think of it as like your body sending up flares to let you know something's off.
Okay, so what are those warning flares? Give us the rundown.
Yeah, so the Better Health Channel breaks it down into 3 categories. They talk about physical, psychological, and behavioral symptoms. So on the physical side, you might notice things like fatigue, headaches, muscle tension, like your body is just kind of permanently clenched.
Oh, yeah, I definitely get the tension headaches. And the sleep. Like when I'm stressed out, I just can't turn my brain off at night.
Yeah, sleep problems are super common. You might also experience digestive issues or even changes in your appetite.
So like our body is literally screaming at us to like chill out. What about like the psychological signs? What's going on in our heads when stress is taking over?
Yeah, well, you might notice increased anxiety, difficulty concentrating. That feeling of being constantly overwhelmed. It's like your brain is in overdrive and you can't switch it off.
So like, you've got like a million tabs open in your mind and you can't focus on any of them. And then there's the behavioral changes, right? Like how does stress actually mess with how we act?
Yeah, you might find yourself withdrawing from social situations or getting easily irritated. snapping at your colleagues or your loved ones. Or you might start procrastinating or making careless mistakes because your focus is just shot.
So basically, we've got this old cocktail of symptoms to watch out for. And it seems like the important thing is to be aware of those red flags so we can catch things early on, right?
Exactly. The earlier you recognize that you're stressed, the sooner you can start implementing strategies to manage it. Because the good news is there are things you can do to take back control.
Okay, now we're talking. Let's dive into those strategies and figure out how to turn this stress ship around.
Let's do it. Okay. So, before the break, we were talking about like those classic stressors that kind of get to all of us, but
Yeah.
recognizing them is only like the first step, right?
Right.
Now we need to actually arm ourselves with some tactics to fight back.
Yeah, like we're not just going to sit here and wallow in our stress.
Mm,
We're going to actually be proactive about it.
exactly.
I like that. But where do we even start?
Well, remember those stress diaries that we talked about earlier? Like the NHS, they recommend them for a reason.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just about venting your frustrations, although that can be helpful too. It's about really becoming a detective of your own stress.
So we're going full Sherlock Holmes on our stress.
Exactly.
I love that.
You're looking for patterns, clues, those telltale signs that kind of reveal what's really pushing your buttons.
Hmm.
Are there certain tasks that consistently make you feel anxious? Is it a particular time of day when your energy dips and your stress levels spike? Maybe it's certain people or interactions that trigger those negative feelings.
Oh, yeah. Like I know I get super stressed when I have like back-to-back meetings all day long. By the end of the day, I'm just fried. So maybe like blocking off some buffer time in between meetings would help me like take a breath and reset a little bit.
Exactly. Or maybe you realize that, those Monday morning meetings are a nightmare because you never feel prepared. So you actually like schedule some time on Friday afternoon to review the agenda, gather your thoughts.
It's all about taking control of the situation rather than letting the situation control you.
Yeah, and sometimes taking control means accepting that there are things you simply can't change. The NHS talks a lot about this, focusing on what you can influence. So you might not be able to change the fact that, a huge project is due next week, but you can break it down into smaller, more manageable tasks.
Right. It's like that whole like eating the elephant one bite at a time analogy. It's just less daunting when you can focus on like those smaller wins. And sometimes those wins can be as simple as like, changing your physical environment.
Yeah.
I know that if my workspace is cluttered, my mind feels cluttered too. So maybe taking a few minutes to tidy up my desk or adding a plant can make a huge difference in how I feel.
Absolutely. And, don't underestimate the power of natural light and fresh air. If you can position your desk near a window or take short breaks outside, even just a few minutes of sunshine can do wonders for your mood and energy levels.
Okay, so we're journaling, we're breaking down tasks, we're making our workspace like, a stress-free zone. What other tools can we add to our stress-busting toolkit?
Well, remember those deep breathing exercises we mentioned earlier. The NHS, they emphasize them again and again because they're so simple yet so effective.
Yeah.
When you feel that stress response kicking in, just pause, take a few slow, deep breaths, and focus on the sensation of your breath entering and leaving your body.
I used to think that stuff was a little bit like woo-woo, but I've actually found that it really helps. Even just a few minutes of like mindful breathing can like help me calm down and approach a situation with more clarity.
It's like hitting the reset button on your nervous system. And the best part is it's a technique you can use anytime, anywhere. Waiting for a meeting to start, deep breaths, stuck in traffic, deep breaths, feeling overwhelmed by your inbox. You guessed it. Deep breaths.
So it's like our own portable stress reliever. I like that. And then along with those kind of like in the moment techniques,
Mm.
we need to make sure we're also taking care of ourselves in the long run, right? Like the healthy habits that kind of build resilience to stress.
Absolutely. Think of it like, making deposits into your stress management bank account.
Okay.
The more you prioritize those healthy habits, getting enough sleep,
Mm.
eating nutritious foods, moving your body regularly, the more resources you'll have to kind of draw on when those stressful situations inevitably arise.
So it's not just about like surviving stress, it's about thriving in spite of it.
Exactly. It's about building a foundation of physical and mental well-being that helps you kind of weather those storms. And one of the most important things you can do in that regard is setting boundaries, especially in this age of constant connectivity.
Right. Like actually logging off at a decent hour and not checking emails 24/7. I know it's easier said than done, but we've got to protect our personal time.
Yeah, it's not just about protecting time, it's about protecting your energy and your mental space. So create a ritual that signals the end of your workday. Whether it's closing your laptop, silencing your notifications, changing into comfy clothes, it's about kind of drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is work time and this is me time.
It's like those boundaries are like a superpower in today's world. And
Yeah.
I love that, you emphasize seeking support when we need it. Like we
Yeah.
don't have to go through this alone. Talking to someone we trust, whether it's a friend, family member, or even a therapist, can be so incredibly helpful.
Yeah, remember, asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. It shows that you're prioritizing your well-being and taking proactive steps to manage your stress. And there are so many resources available, employee assistance programs, mental health hotlines, support groups. You don't have to navigate this on your own.
And it's not just about individual coping mechanisms, right? Like
hmm
our sources, especially the Better Health Channel, they talk about the role of employers in creating healthier workplaces.
Oh, absolutely. Companies need to step up and create cultures that prioritize employee well-being.
Right.
That means promoting open communication about mental health, providing resources and support, fostering a respectful and inclusive work environment.
Yeah, remember that BBC News piece we were talking about earlier? It
Mm.
highlighted how some companies are actually offering mental health benefits
Mm.
and developing programs to support their employees' well-being.
Yeah, that's a huge step in the right direction.
For sure.
It's about recognizing that a healthy and supported workforce is a more productive and engaged workforce, a win-win for everyone. So with all these strategies we've discussed, is there one that you find particularly powerful?
For me, it's all about self-awareness, taking the time to understand my own stressors,
Yeah.
my triggers, and what helps me feel like grounded and calm. It's like having a personalized stress management manual that I can refer to when things get tough.
I love that analogy. It's about building a toolkit that works for you. Because what helps one person manage stress might not work for another.
Exactly. It's a journey of discovery, and the most important thing is to keep experimenting and find what works best for you. And remember, even small changes can have a big impact on your overall well-being.
Absolutely. That leads us perfectly into the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore how to actually make those changes stick and create lasting habits for a less stressful work life. So stay tuned.
Okay, so welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent most of this episode talking about stress at work, like all the sneaky little triggers and the telltale signs that it's time to take a step back.
Right.
And, we've talked about a bunch of different strategies to reclaim your calm, everything from deep breathing to setting those boundaries.
Yeah.
But now we've got to talk about the real challenge, which is how do we actually make those good intentions, turn into lasting habits? How do we go from fleeting moments of zen to a work life that actually feels less stressful?
Yeah, it's the age-old question, isn't it? Like, we can have all the knowledge and all the tools in the world, but actually putting them into practice day after day, that's where the magic happens. And let's be honest, it's not always easy.
No, it's not.
Work gets crazy, deadlines loom, and suddenly we find ourselves right back in those old patterns, feeling overwhelmed and depleted.
Right. It's like we know what we should be doing,
Yeah.
but actually doing it, that's a whole different story.
Right.
So spill the beans. What's a secret sauce for making those healthy habits actually stick?
Well, I think one of the biggest traps people fall into is trying to do too much too soon. They get all fired up and decide to overhaul their entire work life overnight, and then they burn out before they even really get started.
Right.
So the key is to start small, really small.
Okay, so instead of trying to meditate for an hour every morning, I should maybe just start with 5 minutes of deep breathing at my desk.
Exactly. Choose one or two strategies that really resonate with you and make them non-negotiable parts of your day. Think tiny tweaks, mini habits, whatever works for you. Because those small wins, they start to snowball into bigger changes over time.
I like that. And it's not just about willpower, right?
Hmm.
We have to stay motivated, especially when those inevitable challenges pop up, because work is rarely a stress-free paradise.
So true. That's where having a strong why comes in. Why are you doing this? What's the bigger picture you're working towards? Is it to improve your health, your relationships, your overall sense of well-being? Connecting to that deeper purpose can give you the fuel to keep going even when it feels tough.
Yeah, it's like having that North Star guiding you back on course.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can also be really helpful to have an accountability buddy. Someone who can cheer you on and provide support along the way, whether it's a colleague or a friend or a family member. Having someone to share your goals and your challenges with can make a huge difference.
Totally. And don't forget to celebrate those successes, no matter how small they may seem. Did you stick to your work hours today? Did you take a few minutes for like a mindful walk during your lunch break? Give yourself a pat on the back. Acknowledging those wins helps reinforce the positive changes that you're making.
It's like those gold stars we got in elementary school.
Exactly.
But what about when we stumble? Because we're all human. And there are going to be days when those old habits creep back in. How do we deal with those setbacks without getting discouraged?
That's where self-compassion comes in. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer a friend. You wouldn't berate a friend for having a bad day, would you? So why do we do that to ourselves? Acknowledge the challenge, learn from it, and recommit to your goals. Progress isn't always linear.
It's about embracing the journey bumps and all. And something that really struck me from our conversations earlier was like how important it is to seek support when we need it. Like sometimes we just can't do it all on our own. And that's okay. Reaching out to a therapist or a counselor or even just a trusted friend can provide a safe space to process our emotions and gain perspective and develop healthy coping strategies.
Couldn't agree more. We often try to be superheroes and handle everything ourselves. But sometimes the bravest, most empowering thing we can do is ask for help. Remember, there's no shame in reaching out for support. In fact, it's a sign that you're taking your well-being seriously.
And I think it's also important to remember that creating a less stressful work life isn't like a one-time fix. It's an ongoing process. It's about, continuously checking in with yourself, evaluating what's working and what's not, and making adjustments along the way. It's about being kind to yourself and recognizing that this is a journey, not a destination.
It's about finding that sweet spot where you feel challenged and engaged in your work without feeling completely overwhelmed and depleted. And the rewards are so worth it. Reduced stress, improved health and well-being, increased productivity, and a sense of fulfillment that goes beyond just checking things off your to-do list.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. What's one small change you can make this week to reduce stress at work? It could be setting a boundary, or prioritizing a self-care practice, or simply taking a few minutes each day for mindful breathing. Whatever it is, commit to taking that step and notice the difference it makes.
And as you kind of embark on this journey towards a less stressful work life, remember that you're not alone. There are resources and support systems and strategies available to help you along the way. So take a deep breath, believe in yourself, and embrace the power of creating a work life that nourishes your mind, body, and spirit.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We hope you gained some valuable insights and practical tools to help you navigate, the ups and downs of work life and create a more fulfilling and balanced experience. Until next time, take care. And remember, you've got